In this video, we're going to take a look at Falcon 2 and talk about exactly what it is, what are some of its features and functionality, and how you can go about navigating the interface. This is going to be an overview, but in future tutorials, we're going to go into great depth on how to navigate. We're going to cover each oscillator in depth. We're going to cover the effects and everything else that you want to know about Falcon. So this is just going to be kind of a jump start to cover the basics, and mainly I wanted to put this together for those of you who may be considering Falcon and you're unsure and you want to kind of see a video on what the features are, how it works. And also this is for those of you who may have recently purchased Falcon, but you are maybe a little bit intimidated by the interface and you're struggling with getting going. So hopefully at the end of this video, you'll feel a bit more comfortable and you'll be able to get some of your ideas out and work more quickly within Falcon. But again, there's going to be a in-depth series that I'm going to be releasing over the coming couple of weeks, several weeks, that will be in depth and cover every feature of this awesome VST. So let's go ahead and get started. Come to the UVI folder here and drag that in. So this way we're going to start on the same page here. So this is what we see when we first launch Falcon. And what exactly is Falcon? So Falcon is a hybrid synthesizer. It has 16 oscillators. Also, it can play back high quality sample libraries or instruments that include pianos, orchestral instruments, vintage analog instruments, and more. And we can even use the sample engine in Falcon for time stretching, pitch shifting, slicing, and even granular synthesis. So it has a tremendous amount of capabilities, and we're just going to go ahead and dive right in here. Now, we're going to start off kind of with the basics as far as sample libraries and instruments. We'll start off slowly here. So I'm actually going to go to the UVI website here, and then here I'm on the soundware tab, and we can kind of get an idea of all of the different libraries and instruments that are available for Falcon. And so you've got piano, you've got orchestral instruments, all sorts of things here, augmented piano, orchestral suite. So there's a lot of different things, instruments here that you can add on. And if you were more interested in the sample libraries and these instruments, there's even a free workstation. So under instruments, we've got UVI workstation. That is actually free, and you can download that now, and it comes with about 25 or 30 sounds, high quality sounds. And you can check out the workstation and hear kind of the quality of the Falcon before you even buy. But you can use the free workstation with any of these libraries or instruments. So just to give you an idea of what's out there, there are also third-party providers that make instruments for Falcon or the workstation. Now, with that, I'm going to start with, I actually downloaded a free basic instrument for Falcon or the workstation. So we're going to start and just take a quick look at that just so you can see how you can go about loading that in. So I'm going to come up to this wrench icon. We can load, save multis. We can load and save programs. I want to load a new program or load program. And I'm going to come to my desktop, my Quanta folder, sounds and samples. Okay, so the cello freebie here. So here, when I double click on that, we can see some of the different presets that are available. I'm going to choose this pizzicato with reverb. And so that loads up, and then now okay, so pretty straightforward. We've got this cello patch loaded up in here. We are shown the info view, just a basic design here that the third-party provider created. We can also come to the edit view here and actually take a look at all of the different samples that are contained within this library for the cello. Okay, and so that's pretty straightforward. We see we can load up different instruments and sample libraries within Falcon. That's one aspect of it. Now let's move on. I'm going to clear this multi out. And let's just briefly take a look at the header up top here. Now, we already saw this wrench icon. We can load multis and save them, as well as programs. The programs are, you could think of as the instruments. Multis can have multiple parts or multiple instruments within them. We have a preferences area here, so some general settings here. We can alter the coloring scheme. We've got scaling and some other things here that we'll look at more in depth in future tutorials. So that's what the wrench icon here is for working with the multis, programs, and your preferences. At the very bottom, we can change to small size, which is what it's in by default here. We can come to a big size. And then we have fit screen size, which is not going to change because it's already kind of fitting in that large size. I'm going to come back to the small size though. Now, next up we have main, mixer, and performance. So these are going to be important tabs because they will determine what we see in this center area. And we'll do a lot of work in the center area. So this is kind of the top level that's going to control what we see here. So by default, we'll be on main. And while we're on the main tab, we have these tabs here on info view, edit, effects, events, and our modulation. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. So when we're on main, we have these tabs available to us. If we come to the mixer tab, then we can see a mixer that is available. So you can load multiple parts, multiple instruments within Falcon. So when you have more than one, you're going to see the channels for those different parts or those different instruments, and you can adjust the levels here. You can use these aux channels to create sends with effects on them. And then we have a master channel here. Now we also have some controls in the bottom right hand corner that's going to allow us to choose what we see here. So we can hide the various parts that we may have. In this instance of Falcon, we can show and hide our aux channels. We can show and hide our master channel. And here we can show and hide our effects for the various channels here. And then this last icon here is going to allow us to show or hide our aux sends here. And when we have that open, we can choose whether it's going to be pre or post fader with these icons. So that's just a quick look at the mixer. Next, we have performance. And this is going to give us kind of a broad view of if we have multiple instruments or multiple parts, we can have this open and say if we're doing live performance, we can easily adjust the volume for each part or instrument. We can adjust the panning. We've got octave, semi, main, out. We can choose a different out for the various parts that are loaded. We can choose the MIDI channel. We can mute our solo. And we can also adjust the keyboard range for any particular part or instrument just by click, hold, and dragging. By default, it's going to be set to C-2 to G8. We can also adjust the velocity range here. And all the way to the right, we can set up a key switch here. Now let's come back to the main view here, and next to the right we have these two buttons that will allow us to choose whether we want to have these side panels open. So if I click here, then we close out that left panel. If I click here, we close out the right browser. But I'm going to go ahead and leave those open for this video. We then have tempo controls, and we can even tap tempo in here. This is a sync button. When we have this engaged, the tempo for the Falcon, this instance of the VST, will be synced to whatever we have set within our DAW. We have some other controls here that I'll cover at a later time. We have our master tuning, which is going to be on 440 by default. And we then have a global volume control with meters. So this global volume is for this this instance of Falcon, and it also ties in with the volume control here. So as I adjust here, we can see that that is adjusted up above. We can Alt and click to take our controls back to their default position. We then have our master tuning here as well. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and load a preset from the factory, maybe say a bass sound. We can just open up the particular folder, come to the Falcon library here, that will expand out, click on the arrow, double click on a preset, then that loads up, and we can see the name of our preset here, 303 possibilities. And then as I play, we can see our level meters here, as well as up above. And we have a separate volume control. This is going to be specifically for this part, the 303 possibilities. If I were to add another instrument or another part in here, then we're going to have separate volume control for that. So we can add extra parts or additional instruments by clicking on the plus symbol up above here. So if I click that, we now have a new part where we can load a new preset in. So if I double click here, we now have a second instrument. We can see the preset name here, and that's different from here. And this is why we have additional volume controls, so we can adjust these in relation to one another here. If I were to come to the mixer, then we can see we can adjust these here as well. I lowered that in the main view, and you can see that that's lowered here. If I alt click to take that back to 0 dB and come back to the main, we can see that that's now on 0 dB as well. So just separate controls for each instrument or each part here. We have our preset name. We can choose the MIDI channel for each part here. Now, this is going to default to the next number, which is 2. So when I play with my controller, we're only going to hear that first one. So if I'd like to hear both on the same channel, I'd need to change this to Omni or put that on to 1. And now okay, now we can hear both at the same time. Now to the right of that, we have mute and solo controls for each part. And if we would like to remove a part at any time, just be sure that it's selected, and then we can click on the minus button here. So to the left here, we've already seen what we can do with the parts and some of the controls here. We also have a couple other tabs. The center one is a tree view, and this is going to allow us to see the hierarchy of the particular part that we're working with. So we can see part 1 here. If I still had that second part in here, then I would be able to select it by clicking on this drop-down menu here. And again, in the center area, this is just going to show us the hierarchy of what's going on within our instance of Falcon. So at the very top, we have master, and this essentially represents this entire instance of Falcon as a VST within the DAW that you're using. The next level down is the part. Okay, so that's this here. And then within our part, we have the preset name. So 303 possibilities, that makes sense because of 303 possibilities. Now, below our part, the next level here is our program. Now we can have only one program within a part, but we can have multiple parts within our instance of Falcon. And so when we expand out to look at this program, we can see different effects, events, and modulation that are going on within it. So we can show and hide those things here. So this, if we would like to see our effects, we can show those, our events, our modulation, and our aux effects nodes. Now, the next in line below the program level would be the layer level. And so if we click on the arrow, then we can expand out to see what's going on with it. We can see there's an arpeggiator and a spark verb on that layer. We have one layer. Then at the very bottom, we have a key group. And if we click the arrow, we can expand that out and see what's going on with it. We have an analog oscillator on it. We have a noise oscillator and a digital filter as an effects. So just pay attention to the icons here, and that will give you an idea of what these are. And they tie in with these icons up above if you'd ever like to clean things up and hide some things that you don't need. So say you don't need to see event processors, then you can click there to hide those. So this is going to be similar to kind of the Windows Explorer, how you can drill down from your C drive to your documents, to your folders, to individual files. By clicking here, you can access everything, see what's going on, and power things on and off. You can mute and solo different layers or parts. And at the very bottom, we have an inspector, which is going to give us more detailed information about whatever we have selected up above. So if I select the part, then we can see information on it, the volume, the fine tuning, the MIDI in channel. If I select the layer, Then we can see things here like the color. If I click there, we can change the color of that layer, its volume, its panning, and so on. And we're going to spend a lot more time on this area in future videos, but this is just an overview. Now, the next thing we have is a list view, and this is going to, again, give us a bit more information about what we have going on in our part. Up at the very top, if I had multiple parts in here, then we could choose the different parts in that area as well. And again, we're going to come back to this section in a future tutorial. This is just an overview, so we're going to go ahead. I'll leave this on the tree view. Let's move over to the main area. And I'm going to click on the edit knob, and this will allow us to see everything that's going on in a more detailed view, and we can alter or tweak the different parameters for this preset, this part, within the edit view. And at this point, I kind of want to take a second to just kind of say that I think it's very important to really understand the hierarchy and structure of Falcon, because most of us know what oscillators are. Most of us work with sampling. We know what effects are, reverb. We know what delay does. But you really need to take the time to understand the architecture and the hierarchy, and then that's going to make everything else so much easier. So in the manual, I actually took an image here that shows kind of the hierarchy, and I would recommend going to the manual and even using your snippet tool or whatever the Mac has for accomplishing the same thing. Go ahead and take a snippet of this diagram and just print it out and look at it from time to time to help you understand what's going on. So, and this is going to make sense. This may not be exciting, but it will make sense in a little bit as we continue to work with Falcon. So these icons are important. So the cube you can think of as the instance of Falcon within your DAW. It is what we drag in and what we see. That's the top level. And at that top level, we can apply effects, modulators, and events. The next level down from that would be the part. And we saw those, how I added one part, I added the second part, and I removed the second one. That's the next level down. And at the part level, we can also have effects, modulators, and events. And the reason why we have the plus and the ellipsis here is that indicates we can have multiple parts. So we could have a lead, a bass sub, a sample, 3 different parts loaded within our multi. Now below our part is the program. And again, we can also have effects on that, modulators, and events. We don't have the plus symbol because we can only have one program within a part. Now the next layer below the program, or the next level, is the layer, which can also have its own effects, modulators, and events. And as you can see here, we can have multiple layers within a program. And the final in this hierarchy would be the key group. And we can also have separate effects, modulators, and events on our key group, as well as the oscillator, which is going to be the foundation for our sound. It's the oscillators, and that sits at the very bottom within our key group. And as indicated here, we can have multiple key groups within our layer. So just, again, if you can, print this out and just look at it from time to time, and particularly pay attention to these icons here, because they're really going to help you understand where you are and where you're working and what sort of effect you're going to have when you apply an effect or a modulator to a particular layer or a program. So if you were to have two separate key groups, 2 different key groups within a program, and you only want to apply a particular effect to one key group but not the other, then you may want to put one of those oscillators in a separate layer. So you have 2 layers, one will have a key group and the other one will have the other. And that way you can control what effects are going to be applied to what oscillator or samples that you're working with. So just keep these in mind, and then let's move on back to the Falcon here. And you can see again, these are the icons, and that's why it's kind of important to understand what they are and how they relate to one another. And they almost kind of make sense here because you can see this top one is filled in, which is kind of the top layer, the program. You can see that here. Then we have a layer, and that center square is filled in, indicating that it sits in between the upper level of the program, but above our key group, which is here. In our key group, this icon has the bottom square filled in. So that's one way that it helps me remember how these relate to one another. And so when we look at the tree view here, we see 303 possibilities, and we can see that here. This icon matches this icon. So we know these relate to one another. And so if I'm looking at the tree view and I want to know what's going on in that top program level, I can see that it has a script processor, a 3-band shelf, drive, maximizer, etc. And I can even power those on and off here. If I come over to the program level, then you can see 3-band, drive, maximizer, the same as what is listed here. Script processor, and we have decay, cutoff, subchaos, and spark verb here. Now, those aren't showing here because we have the mods turned off here. If I activate that, then we can see those. And I know this seems probably like a lot that's going on here, but let's just actually clear this out. We can use these icons up above to hide whatever we don't want to see. And if we start at the very top at the program level, notice this icon matches there. When I activate that, we're only seeing the program level. And each of these panels, we can also choose what we'd like to see here. So this first icon is going to show the parameters in this area, our gain, pan, and so on. So if I deselect that, those go away. Our effects, we can show and hide those. So you can see effects, event, and mod. These tie in with these. So that's our events, our modulation. So we can have a lot of flexibility in what we can show and hide within this edit view. So this is everything within our program panel. Now, the next one would be our layer, right? So if we look at the chart again, here's the program, the layer, then the key group. So our layer, now we can see the controls for it. Also, we kind of have this arrow where we can hide everything all at once as well for each one of these. Okay, so our layers, layer 1, that ties in here. With our tree view, we can see we have arpeggiator, spark verb, and we cannot see those here because, again, we have these icons where we can choose to show and hide different things. This one is for our parameters, like the gain and pan. If I choose to show the effects, then we can see our spark verb, which is here. If I choose to show the events, then we can see our arpeggiator, which is here in the tree view. And at any time we would like to work with these effects or events or modulation within the edit view, we could just simply click once and then we have access to that. Clicking once again and we can hide it. If we would like to say see our 3-band shelf, then we can click once to show and hide any one of these. And just to simplify things, I'm going to hide the modulation and events in the program level. And then let's move on to show that bottom layer, which is our key groups. So I'll click this icon here, and you can see as labeled key groups. We have similar controls, gain and pan, which can be hidden with the parameter icon there. As we've seen up above, we have our effects. We can show and hide that here. And then we have our modulation. And again, if we were to come over to the tree view and look at the key group, this icon matches this icon. Just remember to use these as a guide, as a kind of a legend as to where you're working at. We can see analog, noise, and digital filter are what is contained within our key group here. And we can see our digital filter, which is listed here, because we're choosing to show that with this effects icon being active. If I activate here, we can see we actually have an amp envelope as well. If I click once, then we can see that. Now within our key groups, we have our oscillators, which we can show by clicking here up above. And now we can see we have a noise oscillator and an analog oscillator. And again, referring to our tree view, we can see analog and noise, as well as a digital filter, which is here. Next in line, we have our mapping editor, and we can show and hide by clicking here. And this is where we can map our oscillators or samples that we drag into. And we see we have key group 1, and we can see that listed here, key group 1. Now, what is a key group? It's just a group of keys. So if I come to the edge here and drag, then this would be the group of keys considered key group 1. So it's really just it sounds fancy, but it's just a group of keys that we choose to place our oscillators and samples on. And we can just come to the edge and drag that back out. And then in this way, this just means that all of the keys on our controller, if you have 88 keys, are going to play this particular oscillator, the analog oscillator. Now, the very last icon that we can show and hide, use to show and hide, is the modulation section. So if I go ahead and activate that, then we can see that that pops up down at the bottom. And these are organized by, in a hierarchical way. So you can see the key group has the amp envelope. Again, we can click once to show and hide that. We don't have any modulation on our layer group. This icon represents the layers, if you remember. At the program level, we do have decay, as well as cutoff, subchaos, and spark verb. And I'm just going to go ahead and hide the modulation area by clicking that arrow. And so I hope that's been helpful in getting a better understanding of how you can navigate and how things relate to one another as far as the hierarchy is concerned within Falcon. And at this point, I'm actually going to, let's clear out this multi, and then let's take a look at the different oscillators that are available. So we can access the oscillators by coming here. Before that, we have a search function for our presets, but we're just going to come to the oscillator section and work with these for a second. So at the very top, we have sample, and we have different sampling types that we can work with. So we have ERCAM. If I expand that out, we have backwards, coarse, noisy, and so on. We've got multi-granular, scrub, stretch, basic sampling. That would work just like a standard sampler. We've got slice and stretch. And below that, we have synthesis, and we have additive, analog, analog stack, drum, FM, noise, organ, pluck, and wavetable. So we've got everything that we would need to make any sound that we would like. And maybe we could just start at the bottom and just quickly take a look at the wavetable. Wavetable is pretty popular these days, so we'll just take a quick look at that. We can just simply click, hold, and drag over to the mapping area. And while I'm holding, if I go down, then we can map to one particular specific key. If I go up, then we map to the entire keyboard range. Okay, so now we've got this key group 1 of a wavetable oscillator. And we start off on a sine. Okay, now there's over 500 different wavetables available in Falcon, and we can access those by clicking on this down arrow. And so we can see that these are grouped by single or multi. So we've got acoustic, additive, digital. There's just a ton here. Under multi, we've got analog, bass, dirty, and so on. I won't go through every single one of these. Wave. So let's go ahead and actually load in this fuzz off. And let's play this back. We can sweep through this with the wave index here. And if we'd like to apply, say, an LFO to this, then we could right click and come to add modulation. And we would want to come to the internal. We want it to be within Falcon. And let's go to LFO. And then we can come down to the bottom for our modulation. I put that on the layer level so we can see we're on the layer. It's listed here. And we have different parameters here that we can control how this functions as far as the phase, frequency, depth, and so on. And again, we're going to go into great detail on working with wavetable synthesis in a future tutorial. So okay. Now, anytime we would like to remove items, we can just simply click on the X here. And this applies to our oscillators as well. So if we'd like to remove this particular wavetable, then we could just click on that X to remove it. Now let's bring in an additive oscillator so we can just click and drag the folder here over, and it's going to put in a default. We can also expand out and choose something in particular. Let's choose this Sid Boy. Actually, let's delete that out and delete out this key group 1 and just start from scratch. Okay. Again, dragging up spreads that across the entire keyboard. So now let's refer back to our tree view, because we have new program here because we started with a new oscillator. And if we click on this arrow to expand out, then we can see what's going on quickly over here. I just want to show you that again now that we're working with something that we brought in ourselves. So we have our layer level. Let's expand that out. We have key group 1, which is here. If we expand that out, then we can see our additive oscillator. And with that selected in the inspector down below, we can see different information about it. Now let's say we would like to add an effect to this. We could do that at the layer level here. We have effects. We could just simply click on the plus button, come to analog delay. Let's do this retro one. Probably not the best effect for this particular sound, but you can see how that works. Let's take that feedback down. Now, I also want to show how this relates to the effects tab. Well, if we can add effects here and show and hide them here, why do we have this effects tab? This is just going to make it more simply. If you've got multiple layers and multiple oscillators and multiple effects, this, along with the tree view, is going to help you find what you're looking for more quickly. So if I select key group, it's not on the key group. If I select layer, we did put it on the layer. So that's why it shows up when we have this highlighted. So if we come up to new program, I didn't add any effects to the program layer. I didn't add any to the part. So we added it to the layer. So we want to come to layer 1. And then that's how we can see within the effects tab. Now, if we wanted to add an effect to the entire part, we can come to the mixer, and then here is the channel for that oscillator that I brought in. We can click on the plus symbol. We can choose, let's say, a filter. Okay, choose a different model. If we'd like to remove, we can just click on the X here. Now, if we wanted to create a send, then we would just come to one of the aux channels here, click on the plus symbol. Let's add another filter. Let's choose a low pass with 24. And then now we can show our sends with this icon here. Let's send that. Okay, and to remove, we could just click on the X here. All right, now let's come back to the main view and our edit tab. And let's start over again. We can clear this multi out. Let's come to our oscillator section. We've looked at additive. We also have analog stack. We can drag in kind of a preset here, map that. And if we scroll down, then we can see we've got an entire stack of oscillators here. Only 2 are active at the moment. Okay, let's right click and delete that selected key group. Let's try one other one. Okay, so we can power on and off our oscillators with the power buttons up above. Adjust the pulse width modulation, the waveform, and again, we're going to take a really close look at all of these different types of oscillators in a future video. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and delete that out. And let's move on from the analog stack. We've got drum. Let's do snare drum. And I'm just going to send this out to all of the keys. Normally, you may want to just send this to one key. Then you can bring in multiple drum sounds and create your own drum kit within your Falcon here. Okay, and then here we have controls for our drum oscillator. The waveform. Let's try one more. Okay, so you got a huge variety here. Hi-hat, effects, cymbal, bass drum, bass, snare, synth. Under the drum folder, then we have, let's delete that key group. We then have FM, synthesis, we can scroll down to take a look at what's going on with it. Okay, I'm going to right click and delete out that key group. Let's close up FM. We then have noise. We won't go into that one. Organ. Maybe we could bring one of these in here. We've got these kind of drawbars here for adjusting. Okay, we'll clear that out. Let's take a look at the pluck. Let's try out the harp. I'm going to come to the layer level and the effects, and let's put a reverb on here. We can take the time down. Okay, we'll clear this one out also. And what have we got next? I think that rounds out all of them. And that was just a really cursory look. That's not really going to show you the full capabilities of these things when you're really working. But just so you know, the different types that we have available and how you can bring those in and how you can remove them. So we've got synthesis. Now we've got sample. So for this, I'm going to actually come to the browser here and the places. I'm going to come to my sounds and samples folder. You can add places by navigating to the area you'd like to add. Say I wanted to add this folder. It's not really necessary because it's within this one, but you can right click and choose to add to favorite places, and then you'll have quick access to it. So what I want is field samples and random sounds. Let's drag that in and map it across all of our keys. These are auto playing because I have the speaker icon active. If you don't want them to autoplay, then just deselect. You can also use the play button, and then we have volume control for our auditioning here. If you activate this icon here, then your samples will be automatically loaded for you. Okay, so now I've got this mapped across the entire keyboard, and it actually sounds cool because I never removed that IR verb or the I reverb. And we can see our waveform here. And now that we've got this map, we could even do something like hide that view. We can hide our modulation. And so when I dragged this in to the keyboard, it loaded up a basic sampler here. It's in basic sampling mode, but at any time we could just click and hold on that and then choose from one of these other ones. So if I wanted to work with granular, then I can just select that, and then we change to the granular. And I'm actually going to hide some of the other areas of this so we have more real estate. And there is a way to make this larger. I just can't, I may need to show this. Okay, just know that we can make this larger. I just can't remember at the moment. But we can adjust the size of our grains here. Introduce jitter. Scrub through this. We can choose a loop mode as well as a particular region that we'd like to play back. And I have to say, this is actually one of the things I'm most excited about experimenting more within Falcon is the granular synthesis and multi-granular synthesis. So again, if I click and hold here, we can change that to multi-granular. And adjust the voices, raise those up. And what else do we have here? Pressing and holding. We have scrub. Okay, so see, this is something where we could right click and add modulation, internal. Let's put it on the layer level, and we want an LFO. And it's hidden, so we can't see it. If I activate that. Let's raise the gain up. I really like that. Okay, I have to remember to stay on task. I am working on a tutorial here. Okay, so let's go ahead and hide that modulation. And whenever we'd like to remove modulation, we can see that we have it on there. We could just right click and clear modulations, and it's gone. Okay, what else have we got here? We've got stretch. We won't go into that one. Sample, that's what we started off with, and we've got slice. This is going to be more for rhythmic samples or things like drums. Of course, you can apply it to anything you'd like, but we also have stretch, and this is going to allow you to pitch shift your samples without altering their length. And again, we're going to cover each one of these in depth in future tutorials. So there's lots to explore here. And we probably should start to wrap up here. This is probably going on for quite a while. What else? Basically, the browser, we've seen what we can do here. We can navigate to our presets as well as our samples that's in our computer directory. We can search. We can access our oscillators here. We've seen that. We can access effects here. So besides, we can see here, we're in the key groups layer. We can come to the effects section. Let's also bring back the layer. We saw we added that reverb here. We can remove. And we did that by using the plus symbol. We can also come over to the browser, say come to a filter, analog filter, and drag that to our effects section as well. And we added that to the layer 1. It's on the layer level. So if we come to effects and we come to the new program and let's drill down to our layer 1, we should see that analog filter there. And this is yet another way that you can add effects. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get things done, and you can just choose the method that works best for you. We can remove these by clicking on the X. Let's come back to the edit view. And after that, we have multi-effects. These are essentially effects chains. So if I were to come to the mixer area and say we want to an effects change for the master channel. We could come to master and say hi-fi, drag that here, and then we have an effects chain that's created for us, and then we can really dive in and tweak the different parameters on each of these just by selecting each one here. Okay, then we have our events, and these are going to be things like arpeggiators. We're kind of running out of time, I think, so we won't get to this in this video, but just know that you can access these here. And then lastly, we have modulation, and we've worked with these, but just know that we can come to this area and say if we wanted an LFO, and we're in the main view, and say we'd like to put it on our layer 1. We've got an LFO there. Let's remove that. So a multi-envelope. We can click, hold, and drag that to the modulation panel like so. Okay, and so we can see that here on our layer 1. We could always, remember we have these that we can hide to clean things up. Our modulation is hidden at the bottom because this icon is deselected, but if I click there, on our layer level, we can see that multi-envelope, and if I click once, we can access it down below. So this is just a clean way that you don't have to dig through these layers up above. You can always just work with your modulation here, get to the layer that it's on, and then click once to show it. And the very last thing for this video is the info page. So say we're happy with our sound that we created, but we'd like to assign some macros that will control various parameters. We can always come to the info view here. We can click on the wrench icon, and we can choose to add a macro. We can move this wherever we'd like, and double click to name that new macro. Click the wrench icon to close that out. So now we have this macro that we can use to control different parameters. So if we come to the edit view, and let's say we want to apply that to the sample start, we can right click that there, come to assign macro, and then the one that I named new macro, we can choose that. So now we're going to control the sample start time with this macro. Okay, so I think we'll wrap up here. This went on a little bit longer than I had intended, but I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you're maybe feeling a little less overwhelmed if you're just getting started and you've been having a tough time. We're going to go through these one at a time in a more in-depth and slower series of tutorials after this. This was just an overview, kind of moving through here a little bit more quickly, but look out for those. They'll be coming over the next couple of weeks. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. See you later.